Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 video, sports video. And today we're going to be looking at the top 10 soccer in history. Now, it's not just to do with the World Cup. It's also got to do with other leagues too. I am rocking the number 10 for Wayne Rooney and all that. So that's what I'm rocking today. And hopefully all that. You'll see more of it when I do the World Cup stuff. Anyway, we're going to look at the top 10 chokes. And not every choke has to do with a blown lead late in the game. It could even be like, the matchup, all that, the collapse. All right, here we go. Number 10 is the World Cup winner's curse. Now, this is a multiple entry, if you will, as teams that seemingly win the World Cup one year can't even get well in the next World Cup. Now, 94, Brazil won the championship and then took second in 98 when they should have won. If a healthy Ronaldo happened, that would have happened. However, starting in 2002, there would be a bit of a champions curse. The 98 champions were France. In 2002, they were put in a good group. All they needed to do was take down Senegal, Denmark, and can't remember what other team. I would say Uruguay. I think it was Uruguay. Yeah, Senegal, Denmark, and Uruguay. France just needed to be top two. But then France shockingly gave up the first goal of the World Cup to Senegal, to Papa Bouba Diop, RIP. Oh, Bouba Diop is here, and Bouba Diop is here. After half hour play, Papa Bouba Diop, as the great John Motson, the late John Motson, would say. So they should have easily had it. France didn't score one freaking goal. And as you can imagine, that definitely wasn't going to get them through to the knockout stages. The 2002 champions were Brazil. They fell in the quarterfinals to Spain. Or was it France? Yeah, they fell to France in 2006 because they forgot to mark the French player. Um, the 2006 champs, Italy, went to 2010 with one of the easiest groups in World Cup history. And they freaking couldn't even beat New Zealand or Slovakia. They couldn't even do that. And that cost them dearly. The 2010 champs, that being Spain, or Spain, went to 2014, but they were drawn against the runners-up, Holland. And the first game was 5-1, in which Robin van Persie put up the hat trick, and Spain fell flat on their ass. Then Germany, who won the 2014 World Cup, couldn't get out of the group in 2018. Tough. Mexico and South Korea? Really? Well, the 2018 champions, France, kind of broke the World Cup curse by taking second place in 2022. The question is, how will Argentina do for 2026? Anyway, number 9 is Italia versus North Korea, 1966 World Cup. This was a hectic thing and all that. Italy were dominant at soccer. They were the 1934-1938 world champs after all. And North Korea came in through the Asian qualifying because a lot of teams pulled out. The English supporters did not the English people did not want North Korea to qualify. It was their worst nightmare because you know how North Korea is, even in the 60s. So they banished North Korea to the northeast part of England, Middlesbrough, in the Middlesbrough group, and hopefully don't get North Korea. They tried to screw North Korea at every possible image. However, the city of Middlesbrough actually embraced North Korea because Middlesbrough thought out of place too, like they weren't London. So North Korea actually got some fans in Middlesbrough, not because of their world tactics, but because they're outsiders. And not and nothing epitomized that more than their game against Italy, the final group stage game in 1966. All Italy had to do was basically tie North Korea and throw North Korea out. But somehow, someway, in the 17th minute, North Korea scored to make it 1-0. Italy could not believe it. They lost 1-0. Worst of all, they weren't going to the second round. It was the Soviets and North Korea. Imagine that. North Korea actually shocked a lot of people by playing in the quarterfinals and taking a 3-0 lead on Portugal. So anyway, yeah, North Korea could not believe their luck. They ended up they were up 3-0, but then Eusebio took over, scoring 4 goals in that 5-3 Portugal comeback win. Boy, that would have been disastrous. North Korea would have faced England in the semifinals if that was to happen, because England took down Portugal in the semis. Worst of all for Italy is that they basically were expected to cruise through, and when they got home to Rome in the airport, lots of rotten tomatoes were thrown at them. However, Italy did come back in 1970 and got second place, losing to the team of the century, Brazil. Number 8 on the list is Newcastle in the Premier League. Newcastle had everything to play for and all that. 12-point lead. The legendary Kevin Keegan as manager, they were pretty good. And that was when Man U was not really the best in the world. However, Newcastle could not believe it. They had lost their touch. They lost crucial matches, including Liverpool, and then getting Man U to overtake them for the championship. There's that famous picture of Kevin Keegan slumped over the advertising board as Newcastle choked away the Premier League to Man U. Number 7 is Bayern Munich Man U at the Champions League final in 1999, aka the European Club Championship, if you will. So Bayern Munich were stars of Germany. Well, they still are now. They took on Man U, who ruled England in the 90s, in a sense. So Man U got to the final against Bayern Munich, played in Barcelona. Of course, the pre-game ceremony was stunning because you had Montserrat Colby or Caveat Montserrat, the one who did the duet with the late Freddie Mercury on Barcelona, and that they played that. So anyway, that was just amazing and all that. But yeah, Byron scored a quick goal. It was 1-0, and then in stoppage time, extra time in case you had to stop the game in a sense for injuries or substitutions or cards. Manu took care of it. Teddy Sheringham scored to tie the game at 1, and then Olgan Shostar scored to make it 2-1, and Manchester United completed the treble. They won the league championship, as in the Premier League. They won the cup, the domestic cup, which was the FA Cup, and they also won the Champions League, the domestic championships, the continental domestic championships. So they had done what no team in England had ever done, the treble, and they did it. They won 1-0. They won 2-1 over Bayern Munich, and that was huge. That okay? I think of that. Yeah, I said number 7, right? Sorry, sometimes I get myself mixed up. Okay, number 6 is England versus Iceland, Euro 2016. Now, as I said, there's sometimes chokes that don't happen within a game. It's like you can't beat your opponent. England had a decent Euro run, and so did Iceland in their first ever European Championships. So Iceland was drawn with England in the round of 16, the knockout stages. Whoever won would have been probably beaten up by France. I didn't have confidence that England would beat France in the quarterfinals. But the fact of the matter is that England had some Premier League stars and Iceland did not really have it. They did have some guys from Premier League. And their population was over 300,000. That's about 60,000 more than Kitchener Waterloo. So that's for context. But yeah, England was up 1-0. Rudy scored. It was like, yes, game on, game on, game on. And then Iceland scored 2 goals, stunning me. And it was just utter devastation. England losing to Iceland? Really? Iceland? No, they were not full of ice. It was a green country, whereas Greenland is full of ice. How ironic. So anyway, England could not put away Iceland, although France did beat Iceland. So anyway, they exited in humiliation. Oh yes, indeed. Number 5 is Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona, 2017 Champions League. This was a massive choke because in the Premier League, the Champions League, before the final, when you get to the knockout stages, it's a two-leg final, two-leg event, meaning that both teams got to host the other team in a game. So PSG crushed Barcelona 5-1 to get to Barcelona, and all they needed to do was play smart defensive soccer, and PSG was going to move on to the quarterfinals. But somehow, in some freaking way, Barcelona pulled one out of the hat, including that famous Sergio Roberto goal with the last kick of the game. And PSG had just blown it. Barcelona had just beaten PSG and moved on to the next round. So that was just unreal and all that. Number 4 is Brazil versus Uruguay 1950. Now, this wasn't like a massive choke, but the fact of the matter is that Brazil was hosting the championship in 1950. You know, first World Cup since the war happened, and Germany, for the only time in history, did not make the World Cup because they were banned from competing because, their war crapola. And this time, unlike the Treaty of Versailles, Germany needed to pay for their damages and all that. Anyhow, Brazil hosted the World Cup and looked pretty good. They decided to do a 4-team. The 4 group winners would play in a what they call a round robin. All Brazil needed to do was avoid defeat to Uruguay, and they were going to be the World Cup champs. Heck, they even had plans for a World Cup parade, and the Brazilian president declared them World Cup champions before the game even started, in front of almost 200,000 at the Maracana in Rio. Brazil was up 1-0, but then all of a freaking sudden, Uruguay scored a pair of goals, including one by Juan Alberto Scavino. And it was said that Scavino did what only 2 other people did in the Maracana, silence the crowd, including the Pope and Frank Sinatra. Brazil was devastated. Uruguay won the World Cup 1950. Funny thing was, they won the 1930 World Cup, didn't compete in 34-38 because they didn't travel to Europe, because travel to Europe was a whole lot different than it was nowadays. So the problem was Brazil was so bitter that they basically banished their 1950 squad from taking part in Brazilian soccer ever again. Even to watch, they would ban them and all that. They put some of the players in seclusion. Brazil. One good thing about Brazil is that they changed their kits from the white shirts and blue shorts to the yellow shirts, blue shorts we see today. Yeah, that was just bad. Number 3 is AC Milan Liverpool 2005 Champions League final. This was a gigantic choke and all that, because AC Milan was crushing Liverpool in the Champions League final in Istanbul, which was actually the 50th playing of the Champions League final because that started in 1956. So at the 50th playing, AC Milan was up 3-0, and it looked like they were going to knock out Liverpool and bring the Champions League thing to Europe, to Italia. But somehow, in some way, Liverpool scored a couple of key goals to make it 3-2 quickly. And then Xabi Alonso actually scored a goal after his penalty was saved. His penalty kick was saved. He was allowed to take the rebound, and he scored to tie the game at 3. AC Milan and Liverpool both had chances in extra time but failed, and then on penalties, Liverpool goalie Jussi Dudek used the spaghetti legs trick of Bruce Grobbelaar back in 1984 for Liverpool at the European Cup. And it worked. Liverpool would win the penalty shootout. It was one of the greatest chokes ever and one of the greatest finals in Champions League history. AC Milan did get revenge on Liverpool 2 years later. Number 2 is France versus Bulgaria 1993 World Cup qualifier. So France were a decent team and all that. They they were a great matchup. In 1982, the French team were supposed to do well but faltered. They went out in the semifinals in that famous semifinal, which Harald Schumacher, the German goalie, knocked out Patrick Battiston and didn't get any type of penalty, not even a yellow card. France did win the 84 Euros, and then in 86 went to the semifinals, lost it, but took third place over Belgium. Anyway, France in 1986 was good. And then 1990, for some dumb reason, they ended up failing to make the World Cup. That was bad. But what's even worse was 1994 because the French had a pretty good World Cup qualifier group. All they needed to do was score 1 point in their final two games against Israel and Bulgaria. And they were both at home, and it looked like France had it. France had a tie set up with Israel right there and then. And then all of a freaking sudden, Israel scored a couple of late goals to win the game over the French. No big deal. France still had one more game left on November 17th, 1993, when Europe had one of the biggest World Cup qualifier days of all time. It was a massive battle between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which saw the Republic win and sneak into the World Cup second spot in the qualifying thing ahead of the European champions Denmark based on goals scored because they both had the same goal differential. And Spain, even though their legendary goalie Subi actually was red carded for a foul on Denmark's Michael Landrup, Jose Maria Canizares came in net and didn't give up a goal, and Spain won 1-0 and helped the Republic of Ireland out. What's even more shocking was, of course, England being knocked out of the World Cup. And that was the last time England has missed the World Cup. France would take on Bulgaria. All France needed to do was get a point. They had a 1-0 lead. Bulgaria tied it. No big deal. France were just playing, and Eric Cantona was practically just trying to, or was it Ginola? I think it was Ginola. He was basically trying to play it around the corner flag. You play around the corner flag, let the clock run down, and France would have moved on to the World Cup instead of Bulgaria. But all of a sudden, Ginola didn't play the ball perfectly, and then Bulgaria had a couple of key passes as Emil Konstantinov scored a massive goal over the goalie's head. I forget who was the French goalie, but he wasn't really well known. But yeah, it went over his head. And all of a sudden, Bulgaria not only took out the French, and the French were not going to the '94 World Cup. Bulgaria was going there too. And honestly, I think Germany wishes that France took care of business because Bulgaria would go on to shock Germany in the knockout stages and get to the Final Four. Music. And number one, massive choke, and it doesn't have to do with a blown lead. It has to do with a blown opportunity, and that's Brazil 2014 World Cup semifinal against Deutschland. Of course, after watching England be shit against Italy, Costa Rica, and who else was it? Sweden? No, no, Uruguay. I was basically bummed out. It was England's worst World Cup performance since 1958. When they made the World Cup, of course, they missed two in the 70s. But I had them out. My mother's side being part German, I'm like, yes, I got a chance. Germany. But Brazil, who hosted the World Cup, and everyone wanted Brazil to win because Brazil 5-time champs, the most in history. They had a chance. So it was Brazil, Germany in the semifinals. The Dutch would take on Uruguay in the other semifinal. Was it Uruguay? I think it was. No, it was Dutch and Argentina, of course. So anyway, that would be the second game. On the Tuesday, I was actually working a late shift at Target, so I could watch the first half, and of course, be anxious about the second half. But somehow, in some freaking way, Germany pulled a rabbit out of the hat, scoring 4 goals in a 6-minute span to make it 4-0. And Brazil was just basically doing bad defending. It didn't help that their main defender was suspended one game because of too many yellow cards. And also, the great Neymar was hurt in the round of 16 match, so in the quarterfinals, so Neymar couldn't play. A lot of factors ruined Brazil. It was just seeing those kids just crying their eyes out. As Germany would put on a clinic against Brazil 7-1 in one of the greatest World Cup chokes around. I mean, Brazil was supposed to take care of business against Germany, It was like 2-1 Germany or 2-0 Germany, fine, but it was 7-1. No team had ever scored 7 goals in a semifinal in FIFA World Cup history. And of course, no one has conceded 7 goals. But Brazil, of all teams, Brazil was the one who conceded 7 goals. And Germany scoring 7 goals, well, maybe. It wasn't technically over for Brazil because they had to play the third place game against the Dutch. And they laid an egg, losing 3-0. They basically lost the will to live, so to speak. And Germany, what did they do in the final against Argentina? Oh, they just scored a late goal by Mario Götze, beat Argentina, World Cup champs. Yee-hoo! It was a partial yee-hoo for me, but anyway, yeah. Brazil, that was a massive choke. And the worst part is Brazil went bankrupt. Not just from the 2014 World Cup, but from 2016 Olympics and just basically the not getting a lot, not getting their bang for their buck. A lot of people question why Brazil even had the Olympics. The World Cup, it makes sense because it's Brazil. But, just saying, that's all that happens. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.